Good day. I'm Michael Hicks. I'm the Director of International Relations in GAO's Office of Strategic Planning and External Liaison. I'm very pleased to be sitting here with our friend and colleague, Freddy Yves from the INTOSAI Development Initiative in Oslo, Norway. Welcome, Freddy.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're very pleased to have you here, and this will be relatively informal and fun, and I think it'll be of great interest to GAO and the international community via the International Journal of Government Auditing, which will also broadcast this. So maybe, Freddie, just at the beginning, if you could tell us a little bit about the INTOSAI Development Initiative, its mission, and its programs.
The INTOSAI Development Initiative, in short IDI, I know we'll not go with acronyms, is a not-for-profit autonomous body of the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions, which is also called INTOSAI. And that body is mandated to support audit offices all over the world, but mainly in developing countries, in strengthening both their capacity and performance. Having said that, the INTOSAI Development Initiative works closely with other bodies within this international organization in partnership and around different set of programs. But maybe before entering into the what are the initiatives and program, it might be helpful to speak about the how, because that will also illuminate what is some of the strong selling points or added value that the INTOSAI Development Initiative is bringing to the table.
Perfect.
So in that sense, it's safe to say that the Development Initiative, IDI, mobilizes financial but also in-kind support from SAIs, audit offices, and donors all across the world. And that makes it quite interesting in terms of a delivery model where we're able to build on resources and expertise from all over the SAIs to make sure that we deliver strong and impactful programs. And I do think that this is really something that speaks to the motto of the INTOSAI, which is mutual experience benefits all. So having said that, I think it's also good to maybe focus on what do we deliver. And yes, so I would say that since 2018, there has been a global consensus when we look at some of the information that we're gathering through different surveys and reports on 4 key areas where audit offices need constant capacity development. One is independence, and I think we'll come back to that topic as we go along. The other one is what we call governance, everything that is related to the internal dimension of the SAI. The third part is really focused on what we call relevance, because we have to strive for impact. At the end of the day, what we have to do must be impactful and relevant to the stakeholders. And the fourth thing, it's about professional. How can we make sure that our intervention and we build this type of professional capabilities within the audit offices? So around those 4 areas, there's a set of initiatives that IDI, the INTOSAI Development Initiatives, delivers for the audit offices around the world. And those initiatives, as we mentioned, can speak to the independence. How can we support SCIs in strengthening their legal framework? Around the governance area, how can we support SCIs in establishing strategic management practices, strengthen their ethical foundation, work on their ICT governance, also their human resources. Those are some of the initiatives that we're delivering. And when we go to impactful and relevant intervention, we're thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals. Okay. How can we support SAIs in making the contribution there? But more importantly, what type of professionals do we want to build within the SAIs? I'll then add, as a final note on these initiatives and programs, 2 other dimensions that the INTOSAI Development Initiatives work on. Although we want to deliver our intervention from a global perspective, we do acknowledge that certain audit offices have specific needs and cannot be accommodated through global initiatives. So then we have country-level intervention in what we call bilateral countries, where when these audit offices are facing, I would say, strong challenges, they require a specific set of intervention. which will be holistic, in-depth, and upscale support. So on that end, we also have a line of product or initiatives that are targeting specifically these set of countries. And finally, as what we think as a global tool, we also provide global foundations and support to other SAIs, where we try to capture the pulse of the INTOSAI. And one of the flagship elements, it's not an initiative, but it's a product, is what we call the Global Stocktaking Report, which we issue every 3 years, and which gives us the pulse of the region, the community. So this is, sorry for being a bit long, but I think it was an in-depth look on what we provide in terms of programs.
No, it's a wonderful overview. Thank you, Freddie. And we'll have an opportunity to dig in a little bit deeper on some of the areas that you mentioned. But I think before we get into that, I think that viewers might be interested in learning a little bit more about your background, your career path, and what brought you to the INTOSAI Development Initiative in Oslo, Norway.
That's a very interesting question. And to provide a short answer, I would say that I ended up in auditing by accident, but moving to the development initiative INTOSAI was a natural progression in my career. So let's go to the accident first. Okay. I do believe that after graduating from the university, I'm originally from Cameroon. After graduating to the university, it was a natural step for me to work for the public sector. And in that system there, which is heavily influenced from the Francophone sphere, there are application schools that you have to go through to become a public servant. Okay. So then I moved to these schools with no idea about auditing, audit institutions, just wanted to make a contribution in government. But once I graduated, there's a system of posting or placement. And I was then placed to the audit office. Okay. I really didn't know.
Oh, so you didn't even know?
I didn't even know.
What government agency you would?
Yes.
It could have been anything.
It could have been anything. I was more thinking about, okay, the Prime Minister's cabinet,
right.
The Minister of Finance, but then, okay, audit office. Here we go. So then, after the shock, I had to get acquainted with the profession. Get the proper training. And that's really where I fell, I don't want to say in love, but I really started to know more about the business. And that's where I discovered this global community that is INTOSAI. And as I was progressing in my career, moving to performance audits and also the international sphere, I was also getting acquainted with professional development through those different circles that I was mentioning, whether it is the regional bodies of INTOSAI or some of the activities that were done elsewhere. And going then to the natural progression, as I was getting more and more involved, I was also feeling that I was maturing. Initially, I started to participate to IDI programs, the development initiative, just as a participant. Then I was brought in as a resource person, being part of that pool of in-kind contributor. Okay. And after being part of that pool, I think it was just a natural transition for me to also then join IDI as an organization. And that's basically, how it went.
And so now that you're at IDI and established there, I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about sort of specifically some of your main areas of focus professionally.
Yes. When I joined IDI, I think 2017, initially I was tasked into implementing our initiative on strategic planning, performance and reporting, which is called SPMR. Okay. Don't like acronyms, but that's
it's okay.
Unfortunately.
As long as we define the acronyms.
Yes. So that program was really at initial stage. So for 2 years, I was in charge of developing that program and also looking into implementing it. So I was fortunate to implement it in 2 INTOSAI regions, the Pacific one, SAI, and the Caribbean, and also to work strongly on the methodology when it comes to strategic planning, operational planning, monitoring, and reporting. Building on a tool that we haven't mentioned yet, which is called the SAI, the Supreme Audit Institution Performance Measurement Framework, which is a comprehensive tool developed by the INTOSAI community with the contribution of the donors, and can give a clear assessment of where an SAI performance stands at a point in time. So the main innovation through that SPMR initiative was really to mainstream this topic of strategic management and utilize some of the global public goods that were available. So that lasted 2 years. After that, I think from 2019, I transitioned to what we do on independence. And it was still a build-up, starting from scratch and developing, I would say, or contributing to develop most of the work that we're doing now in terms of advocacy and also strengthening that we provide to legal frameworks. On the side, in addition to that, since I've joined IDI in 2017, I am the regional manager for our Caribbean region, the SAI, where I have very strong engagement and interaction with all the SAIs there who are facing specific challenges, because sometimes when we think about the Caribbean, we tend to believe that, okay, because they are in specific financial situation, governance might not be a challenge there. Mm-hmm. There is a strong accountability challenge, and it's very encouraging to see the efforts that are made by all the SAIs in that region to really aspire to become professional and contribute to accountability. So I think that's just me since I moved to IDI.
So you mentioned your work on the independence of supreme audit institutions. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit and maybe define what we mean when we talk about having independent audit institutions and why that's important.
That's a question that I like, because sometimes my son asks me, okay, like, what is independence? And I'm always like scratching my head and then have to think about simple terms and how you can explain that. What I would say is that independence is not something that is just related to audit offices, mm-hmm. but it's this essential need that institutions face to be able to take decisions autonomously, mm-hmm. and operate without undue interference or influence. And that is quite important when you have to provide objective and credible information. So when we think about independence for audit institutions, we can try to bring it simply and structure it around 3 dimensions. One of them is, how are you able to get your resources? And that we can think about financial independence. Are you able to get those resources in a process that is quite autonomous and gives you discretion? So that's very important. The other one is also how you manage your operations. Like organizationally, are you independent? That's also another layer. And one key element, which is the third one, is how are you institutionalized? How are you established in the legal framework of the country? And then we can think about institutional independence. So when we're looking at independence from an SCI perspective, we can structure it around those 3 dimensions. And we can think about how SAIs are actually faring against those 3 dimensions. So I think that as we will go along, we will be able to elaborate a bit more, because we do see that without independence, it is very difficult to operate. Yeah.
And just building on what you're saying, I was wondering if you could maybe give us your views on characterizing the current state of the independence of supreme audit institutions around the world, and are there any noteworthy or emerging trends that you think are important?
Yes. I think it's always, do you look at half full or half empty? Like, what type of lens do you apply? I do think that we can still see some worrying trends, mm-hmm. Concerns about independence, but I do believe that there's also some hope in terms of how audit offices are faring. And we're saying that from the perspective of the data that we've been able to collect over the last decade, including through the global stock taking report that I was mentioning earlier, but also other tools, because recently the World Bank launched an index where it's also focusing on independence. When we look at the picture that is depicted by those different indexes, what we see is that audit institutions are still struggling with their independence, unfortunately. And that is relevant in specific dimension, like the financial autonomy, mm-hmm. like several SAIs. I won't give the data or the percentage, but this is really across the spectrum that we see a significant challenge on the financial autonomy. What we do see is also some concerns around how the audit offices are established in the legal framework. Without getting too specific, when you think about the legal apparatus of a country, you have the constitution, you have the laws, and you have the regulations. What is generally recommended is to have a legal framework that is quite strong and that protects. And we do see that a lot of SAIs, unfortunately, don't have a strong enough protection when it comes to their legal framework. And that's something that is coming of independence. In terms of emerging threats, I would say that, unfortunately, we've seen that COVID and the pandemic had an impact on independence. That several SAIs faced restrictions on their financial independence during the pandemic time. And we also see some emerging threats in terms of decline or correlation between challenges to independence and decline of the rule of law. This is quite, I would say, this is quite visible in certain jurisdictions where we do see that as the judiciary is backsliding or being weaponized, supreme audit institutions are also challenged. Civic space is shrinking, and we can establish a correlation between these different elements. So those are some of the trends that we're observing. But to also bring a positive note, I do believe that there has been more and more awareness on the topic. We do see that stakeholders are trying to act upon it, but now it's more a question of how can we join forces and move forward.
Well, that leads me to my next question. Freddy, it's almost like you had these questions beforehand. What would you say is the best way to draw attention to this issue of the independence of supreme audit institutions and work to address some of these types of challenges that you're talking about? And I know through our work and engagement internationally, we've seen a lot of circumstances where the independence of an audit institution has been threatened through actions such as removing the head of a supreme audit institution without cause because maybe the government had a negative reaction to their audit findings. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how we can work together to draw attention to this issue and help the independent operation of supreme audit institutions around the world.
Yes. Personally, I think it requires all hands on deck approach, really working towards having broad coalition supporting that. But what I do see as maybe an initial step is really to move from awareness raising to action. At one point, it's good to have tangible action to act on an issue. And when I say awareness raising to action, it's because if we think about how independence is positioned internationally, we have several legal instruments who are actually recognizing the independence. We can think about what we have within the INTOSAI community as the INTOSAI principles. We have the Lima Declaration, which is structured around the three pillars that I was initially mentioning. 20 years later, so in 2007, we had the Mexico Declaration elaborating on it. We have several UN General Assembly resolutions recognizing the independence, but maybe we need to do more. Maybe we need more of those type of instruments and also maybe move towards complying with those instruments at the country level. So I do see the need to have some global awareness raising focused on tangible actions. And maybe we'll come back later to some of the projects that we're working on as a way to respond to that. Another point that I think is quite relevant is that, unfortunately, although the challenges can be global, they have a country level dimension. So you have to be able to contextualize the solution to the country context. So it requires some sort of, it's almost like a surgery. You have to be, it's a precision exercise where you have to be able to develop solutions that are fit for context. Building on the other point where you see that SAIs are not operating in a vacuum, maybe it's also worthwhile focusing on other institutions and working around what we call the ecosystem, making sure that if we're able to strengthen also other institutions, that will go a long way in terms of working for greater independence. And finally, that's probably something that we should work more on. I would say that we have to work on the messaging. Independence is not an end in itself. As much as we agree that independence is so important, the question is, okay, if you have independence, then what? It's quite important to work on the messaging and show that independence is a precondition for more effective audit institutions, greater accountability, and maybe further policy objectives. So if we're able, in my view, to act on these different directions, that could be, yes, some progress in the way.
So you talked a little bit about the ecosystem of stakeholders or potential stakeholders as we think about working together in the future and establishing partnerships and programs to try to make some progress on this issue. Who would you say are some of the key players that should be involved if you were to build a coalition of like-minded stakeholders to, as you mentioned, not only address the issue of independence, but lead to more positive outcomes that stem from having independent supreme audit institutions? So who should be involved in addressing this issue going forward?
When it comes to what's happening, I will probably separate what we have at the country level versus what we have at the global level. When we're operating at the country level, I tend to believe that it's like a relay. It's like a relay race. So we have to make sure that we have all the runners that are relevant in that relay. What we've seen, unfortunately, is that they run, but sometimes they run on parallel tracks. We have to put them in the right relay. And I would obviously put the audit officers, but then I will go into other accountability institutions. There is a strong expectation that audit officers can, in a certain way, curb the corruption. Although this is not their mandate, they can contribute to that. But for that, they have to partner with other organizations, other integrity institutions like anti-corruption bodies. But we have to also go beyond the state apparatus and focus also on non-state actors who can contribute to hold government to account. So an essential part of that ecosystem or this coalition that we would establish at the country level would bring in CSOs and also media. But what I would say about these specific set of actors is that sometimes there's a bit of work that needs to happen in terms of leveling the playing field. And for that, you need to make sure that they also understand the messaging that we're bringing out. So we do see the need to sometimes invest in financial literacy for helping these stakeholders to understand the message. And sometimes it's also a message to us audit institutions that we have to adapt our message to the audience. So I do see this as a critical element of creating that constellation of actors. What I would thinking about those coalition, there's a stakeholder that we shouldn't underestimate and act both at the country level and the global level. It's the donor community. Okay. They are a strong leverage point. They can have access to places where we as INTOSAI don't have access to, and can establish direct contact with government and communication, and also convince them or advocate. So I do see a need to strongly engage with the donor community. We're very fortunate that within the INTOSAI, there are some dedicated platform like the INTOSAI Donor Corporation. I think you can say much more about it than me, where we can establish those platforms and generate that awareness. I would also believe that working on establishing this coalition, we shouldn't underestimate the need to work with the executive. From my past experience, sometimes people not acting on issue is not because they don't want to. Sometimes they just don't know how. So also educating the executive on the need for independence, why independent SAI are essential, could be a very positive element of that constellation. And also Parliament, because at the end of the day, regardless of the model of the SAI, the legislative branch is the one holding the government to account and also adopting the law. So viewing the audit reports as a tool that they can utilize could also be a strong selling point in having them understanding the need for independent audit and how independent audit can contribute to their work. So it's a broad coalition. It's a lot of actors, but I do believe that this speaks to this idea of having this all hands-on-deck approach when it comes to tackling that.
So you mentioned the donor community and INTOSAI donor cooperation, which we're both heavily invested in. The Comptroller General is the vice chair of the Supreme Audit Institution side of the INTOSAI donor cooperation, and then the Secretariat for the donor cooperation is run out of IDI in Oslo. And for viewers that are not familiar with INTOSAI donor cooperation, in essence, it's a matchmaking service between INTOSAI and the World Bank and 23 other donors to try to mobilize funds and resources from these donors and get them to Supreme Audit institutions in developing countries that seek to enhance their capacity. So something that we're both heavily invested in, and maybe we'll do another one of these interviews on the INTOSAI donor cooperation. So you mentioned that the importance of understanding the needs of countries and their specific context, and having a surgical approach to tailoring what you're doing to best meet the needs of the countries that you're working with. I was just wondering, based on your experience, you mentioned the Pacific and the Caribbean, which are very different in a lot of ways, but then also as small island developing nations that have many similarities, I would think, in terms of the challenges that they're facing. But I was just wondering if, looking back on your time both in the Supreme Audit Office of Cameroon, but then also during your time at IDI, I'm wondering what some key lessons are that you've learned from working with developing countries in terms of, understanding them and their interests and how to best meet their interests and being respectful of their circumstances.
Yes, I think for me, one of the most powerful lessons was to avoid from having a judgmental approach when it came to engaging with the audit institutions. Sometimes challenges are not a reflection of their capabilities, but it's more a reflection of the constraints that the environment puts on them. And when you're starting from that point, I think one of the lessons that I've learned is that you have to make your due diligence in understanding and educating yourself when it comes to the context. That I found very, very powerful. That it's the beauty is in the questions that you ask, not the answers that you provide. So it's good to ask the right questions and to listen and to come from a non-judgmental perspective. So to me, reflecting on my own experience, coming from a French-speaking African country, going to facilitate a workshop in the Pacific. Yes, you have to be you have to show that you can bring something, but you also first have to make your research and to understand where you're stepping your foot. What I've also found very powerful was to establish personal relationships. At the end of the day, we're humans. We're facing similar needs, and we have to come from an empathetic place. So I always tend to think that it's quite important to walk the extra mile. And I find that very rewarding, just to be able to be in a position to, okay, let's see how we can solve that. So really coming from a place where you're trying to solve issues, where you're trying to make things happen than just looking at the challenges. And for that, I think it's quite important to focus on quick wins. Sometimes, I think a lot of people know baseball. You can't always hit the home run. Sometimes you just have to, go to the first base, right, and then you build in as you go. But the objective is still, yes, to go to the plate. But then I think those are some of the lessons that I've learned over time, that you have to raise or to develop a lot of soft skills. It's quite interesting, it's quite surprising, because we think that auditing is such a technical, but then you have to develop the soft skills that will help you engage with your audience. That's some of the lessons that I've learned over the years.
I think we've had similar experiences in that in this type of work. It seems like the best way and almost the only way to get things done and to collaborate with others is to do exactly what you're saying, sort of understand where they're coming from, and meet them where they are and focus on relationships, because it seems like once we have those relationships, then everything just becomes that much easier. So I was wondering, we've talked a lot about the independence of Supreme Audit institutions, but I was wondering if you could also talk a little bit about what are some other key areas and opportunities to work with developing countries to help them meet their goals in enhancing their capacity as Supreme Audit institutions.
Yes, independence, as we said, is the foundation. But it's not because you have the foundation that you have the whole building. Now, how do you build up? One key area for me, and maybe it speaks to one of the initiative I was working on a bit more, is how do you develop these strategic capabilities in terms of strategic management and being able to understand the changes and the expectations from your environment. Sometimes, unfortunately, I see a mismatch between how SAIs view themselves and what their stakeholders are expecting from them. And I think if we are able to reconcile those views, then a lot of the other issues in terms of training, deciding which topic to audit, a lot of those different issues could be alleviated. But to me, it sometimes starts from understanding from a strategic level that we are here to respond to the needs of the stakeholders. And if we're not able to respond to the need of stakeholders, we have to say why. And we have to find a solution. So to me, this is a critical point where capabilities can be developed. Now, if we go to the technical side of things, obviously training, methodological training, understanding the power of ICT, moving to this digital transformation. And it's not only in how we audit, but it's also how we conduct all our operations. I think, unfortunately, the pandemic showed that we probably had to think differently how we operate and how can we leverage on technology. Coming from an environment where this is not always the case, I'm very happy to see when I discuss with my former colleagues in the SAI of Cameroon that they're jumping on Zoom meetings, that they are now connecting to the audit office's information system to collect. That's a way to go, because those are the changes that you need to impact. So I think ICT is really a domain where sustained effort is required to also bring the audit office to the next level. Continuous professional development, but I think that is really, as we say in French, the raison d'être of the audit offices. Yes, I think I will stop there when it comes to some of those areas.
Yeah, I agree with you about the ICT, and I'm pleased that that's something that we're trying to take on through the INTOSAI donor cooperation, and I think we have good prospects there. And I know we were very concerned, during the pandemic, in the early stages when you had, maybe up to 50% of the Supreme Audit institutions around the world just shutting down and people unable to work remotely and stay safe, and just didn't have the ICT capability to operate in in that kind of environment. And especially that was particularly concerning because you have these accountability organizations that are not operating during a time of unprecedented spending, trillions of dollars being spent on the pandemic response around the world. So I agree with you about ICT, and I'm optimistic that we can make some progress there, and also take advantage of the opportunities that you get through better use of technology in terms of people being able to work from anywhere and have the technology they need to do audits remotely, to communicate, to share resources with colleagues and audited entities through cloud-based systems, et cetera. So hopefully next time we talk, we'll be reporting on progress in that area. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you find rewarding about your work.
That's a very good and interesting question. I mean, I think I could spend a whole interview just speaking about that, because what I found deeply rewarding and greatly rewarding is this ability to connect. I really believe in connectivity. I really believe in this ability to co-create and find solutions to problems. I always get a smile when I see that after a workshop, participants have this moment, okay, I learned something. I really found, to me, that's really rewarding, and it's worth the trips, the pay. That's really a moment where I feel, okay, now, yes. And what is even more rewarding is when they're able to implement. And what I find very rewarding on top of things is, and that's why for me, facilitation is different than it. I learn as much as I share. So I learn from every engagement, different ways of doing things, how things are done in different contexts. And sometimes these are skills or knowledge that I'm able to translate to other parts. So I would say that I'm actually paid for learning, and that's a very nice way of putting it. And I think I'm very fortunate to be in that position. So that I found very rewarding, to be able to be part of a community that is very supportive, very dedicated individual, and where I can both grow personally, but also in a certain way contribute.
So as we were talking about, off air separately today, the international relations team at GAO and the Office of Strategic Planning and External Liaison is just 5 of us, but we really benefit from hundreds of volunteers from across all parts of GAO, which, as you know, is an organization of about 3,500 people. And then in addition to the work of the international relations team, we're involved in the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions. The Comptroller General is in leadership positions within INTOSAI and serves on its governing board. And then I think GAO probably has representatives to 25 working bodies within INTOSAI. And then we have representatives probably to between 5 and 10 initiatives that are run out of your office in Norway, out of IDI in Norway. And we also have a team, a mission team that focuses on doing audits of our government's international engagement. So we have a whole group of people there. And this is a long lead up to the question, but I was just wondering, based on your experience, what advice do you have for our GAO colleagues as they, or anybody really, like this will be posted on the website of the International Journal of Government Auditing. So for anybody here at GAO or around the world, what advice do you have for them as they engage internationally, professionally, through their audit work and involvement with INTOSAI or your initiatives at the IDI?
I think I can't stress enough the fact that none of this would be possible if it weren't for this type of contribution. This is really what makes this happening. The fact that you have individuals who are willing to dedicate their time and effort to help build a community, but also strengthen other audit institutions. That I found very rewarding personally, and I do believe that those who are engaging in that find that very rewarding. So for those who are already there, I'll just keep keep doing it. It's so important and can never be underestimated. I've been privileged to be in a position where I've been a recipient of that support, provided that support, and now in a position where I can also design intervention leading to that support. And when I was on the other side receiving that support, I can't tell you how fortunate we were just sometimes to have international experts come and visit us and share with us and just enlighten us in the way we could do our work more effectively. So, and that's one of the added value that we see within INTOSAI and that motto that mutual experience benefits all. So if one is willing to take his or her part in that process, I think that is really something that should be encouraged. And to me, it's also a question of personal growth, because I think it's something that is really rewarding and helps developing oneself. So I would just say keep doing it, and maybe still on that, would really like, it's not because I'm speaking on GOTV, but I would really like to commend the Controller General, because I do believe that it's a tremendous work that is done by the office, its staff. It's something that can act as an emulation for others. I have lots of colleagues and friends who attended the fellowship program who are also looking into the material, and it's really seeing how a professional office is ran. So yes, just, I don't have any advice, but just keep doing the job, and yes, thank you.
Well, thank you, Freddie. And you talked about how fortunate you felt, and I feel very fortunate to have had this time with you in Washington this week and in the studio today. I'm very grateful for your time and your collaboration and the work that we do together internationally. And those are also nice thoughts to have as we reach this time of the year where the year is almost over. It's always good for us to focus on how grateful we are and how fortunate we are, and hope that that continues into the new year and beyond. So, Freddie, it's been a pleasure spending time with you. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to continuing our work together.
Thank you very much.